5G, the next generation of cellular technology for the next generation of smartphones, is imminent. And with it, there's concern about the health risk of this new, more powerful network. How worried should you be about the coming 5G health apocalypse? By now, you may have seen articles on Facebook or alternative health websites. The gist: 5G is a dangerous escalation of traditional cellular technology, one packed with higher energy radiation that delivers potential damaging effects on human beings. Some 5G conspiracy theorists contend that the new network generates radio frequency radiation that can damage DNA and lead to cancer, cause oxidative damage that can cause premature aging, disrupt cell metabolism, and potentially lead to other diseases through the generation of stress proteins. Some articles cite research studies and opinions by reputable organizations like the World Health Organization. It sounds worrisome, but let's take a look at the actual science. What is 5G? 5G has been hyped for a few years, but this is the year that carriers begin the process of rolling out the new wireless standard. AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint have all started to deploy their networks in the first half of the year, though widespread availability is still a year or more away. 5G will get a foothold in little more than a handful of cities this year. With the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, a number of viral social media conspiracy theories have speculated that 5G is the cause of the world's current problems. Simply put, these claims are factually false. 5G does not cause coronavirus. That isn't keeping device manufacturers and service providers from jumping onto the 5G bandwagon. Samsung's new Galaxy S10 and Galaxy Fold, for example, are both 5G ready, along with models from LG, Huawei, Motorola, ZTE, and more. 5G offers at least a tenfold improvement in network performance. The last major network upgrade was 4G, which debuted in 2009, with a peak speed of about 10 megabits per second. In comparison, 5G is poised to deliver peak speeds between 10 and 20 gigabits per second. And network latency will drop from 30 milliseconds to about 1 millisecond, ideal for video game streaming, online video, and the Internet of Things, which is anticipating 5G to connect sensors, computers, and other devices with ultra-low latency. What is 5G, and how fast will it be? An evolution of concerns. Before we address 5G, it's worth pointing out that the latest health fears about radiation aren't happening in a vacuum. Concerns about 5G are the latest iteration of decades of headlines about the dangers of electromagnetic radiation. We've seen controversies about everything from the health risks of Wi-Fi to smart meters. Electromagnetic hypersensitivity, for example, is a hypothetical disease in which certain people experience debilitating symptoms in the presence of radiation like cell phones and Wi-Fi. So yes, Michael McKean's bizarre behavior on Better Call Saul is a real thing. But despite people claiming such sensitivities for at least 30 years, systematic scientific reviews have found that blinded victims can't tell when they're in the presence of an electromagnetic field, and the World Health Organization now recommends psychological evaluation for people so afflicted. Likewise, decades of studies have found no link between cell phones and cancers like brain tumors, though that hasn't kept municipalities like San Francisco from passing laws requiring stores to display the radiation emitted by handsets, which implies, in the minds of consumers, risk. How dangerous is radio frequency radiation? At the root of all concerns about cell phone networks is radio frequency radiation, RFR. RFR is anything emitted in the electromagnetic spectrum, from microwaves to X-rays to radio waves to light from your monitor or light from the sun. Clearly, RFR isn't inherently dangerous, so the problem becomes discovering under what circumstances it might be. Scientists say that the most important criterion about whether any particular RFR is dangerous is whether it falls into the category of ionizing or non-ionizing radiation. Simply put, any radiation that's non-ionizing is too weak to break chemical bonds. That includes ultraviolet, visible light, infrared, and everything with a lower frequency, like radio waves. Everyday technologies like power lines, FM radio, and Wi-Fi also fall into this range. Microwaves are the lone exception, non-ionizing but able to damage tissue. They're precisely and intentionally tuned to resonate with water molecules. Frequencies above UV, like X-rays and gamma rays, are ionizing. Dr. Steve Novella, an assistant professor of neurology at Yale and the editor of Science-Based Medicine, understands that people generally get concerned about radiation. Using the term radiation is misleading because people think of nuclear weapons, they think of ionizing radiation that absolutely can cause damage. It can kill cells. It can cause DNA mutations. But since non-ionizing radiation doesn't cause DNA damage or tissue damage, Novella says that most concern about cell phone RFR is misplaced. There's no known mechanism for most forms of non-ionizing radiation to even have a biological effect, he says. Or, in the less refined but more visceral words of author C. Stuart Hardwick, radiation isn't magic death cooties. Studies aren't clear-cut. Of course, just because there's no known mechanism for non-ionizing radiation to have a biological effect, that doesn't mean it's safe or that no effect exists. Indeed, researchers continue to conduct studies. One recent study was released by the National Toxicology Program (NTP), an agency run by the Department of Health and Human Services. In this widely quoted study about cell phone radio frequency radiation, scientists found that high exposure to 3G RFR led to some cases of cancerous heart tumors, brain tumors, and tumors in the adrenal glands of male rats. The study is a good object lesson in how hard it is to do science like this. As Real Clear Science points out, the number of tumors detected were so small that they statistically could have occurred by chance, which may be more likely since they were only detected in male subjects. Moreover, the level and duration of the RFR exposure were well in excess of what any actual human would ever be exposed to, and in fact, the irradiated test rats lived longer than the unexposed control rats. Says Dr. Novella, experienced researchers look at a study like that and say that doesn't really tell us anything. Sizing up 5G's risks. Ongoing studies aside, 5G is coming, and as mentioned, there are concerns about this new technology. A common complaint about 5G is that, due to the lower power of 5G transmitters, there will be more of them. The Environmental Health Trust contends that 5G will require the build-out of literally hundreds of thousands of new wireless antennas in neighborhoods, cities, and towns. A cellular small cell or another transmitter will be placed every 2 to 10 homes according to estimates. Says Dr. Novella, what they're really saying is the dose is going to be higher. Theoretically, this is a reasonable question to ask. But skeptics caution you shouldn't conflate asking the question with merely asserting that there's a risk. As Novella points out, we're still talking about power and frequency less than light. You go out in the sun, and you're bathed in electromagnetic radiation that's far greater than these 5G cell towers. It's easy to find claims online that the greater frequency of 5G alone constitutes a risk. RadiationHealthRisks.com observes that 1G, 2G, 3G and 4G use between 1 to 5 GHz frequency. 5G uses between 24 to 90 GHz frequency, and then asserts that within the RF radiation portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, the higher the frequency, the more dangerous it is to living organisms. But asserting that the higher frequency is more dangerous is just that, an assertion, and there's little real science to stand behind it. 5G remains non-ionizing in nature. The FCC, responsible for licensing the spectrum for public use, weighs in as well. Says Neil Derek Grace, a communications officer at the FCC, for 5G equipment, the signals from commercial wireless transmitters are typically far below the RF exposure limits at any location that is accessible to the public. The FCC defers to the FDA for actual health risk assessments, which takes a direct but low-key approach to addressing the risks. The weight of scientific evidence has not linked cell phones with any health problems. In 2011, the World Health Organization weighed in, classifying RF radiation as a Group 2B agent, which is defined as possibly carcinogenic to humans. This, too, is nuanced. Says Novella, you have to look at all the other things they classify as a possible carcinogen. They put it in the same class as things like caffeine. That is such a weak standard that it basically means nothing. It's like saying everything causes cancer. Part of the problem with the WHO declaration is that it's focused on hazard, not risk, a subtle distinction often lost on non-scientists, not unlike the rigorous distinction between precision and accuracy. Precision refers to how tightly clustered your data is, accuracy refers to how close that data is to the real value. You might have a dozen miscalibrated thermometers that all tell you the wrong temperature with a very high degree of precision. When the WHO classifies coffee or nickel or pickles as a possible carcinogen, it's asserting hazard without regard for real-world risk. Explains Novella, a loaded pistol is a hazard because theoretically, it can cause damage. But if you lock it in a safe, the risk is negligible. Scientists will continue to test new networks as technology evolves, to make sure the technology we use every day remains safe. As recently as February, U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal critiqued the FCC and FDA for insufficient research into the potential risks of 5G. As the NTP study shows, research into radiation risks is difficult and often inconclusive, meaning it can take a long time to make real progress. But for now, everything we know about 5G networks tells us that there's no reason to be alarmed. After all, there are many technologies we use every day with a substantially higher measurable risk. And as Dr. Novella says, with 5G the hazard is low, but non-zero, and the actual risk appears to be zero. We've picked up no signal in the real world,